Welcome to part 4 of Picture Day Mistakes with bathrooms and bedrooms. If you are the person who decides what marketing gets posted to promote your real estate related business, today's video will give you some great training of what to look for to help you decide if your marketing photos are going to harm your reputation and financial success, or if you are going to be effective at attracting your ideal clientele. I'll link part 1 below, just in case you didn't see that first. All right, so now let's move on and get ready to go into the next room, and we have an establishing shot to help us with this, or going from the kitchen and seeing how it's connected to the dining room, kind of our next area we want to go towards. And again, the realtor did a nice job with this, so a little straighter. Again, the color is pretty decent, still a little bit yellow, but it does show where we're getting ready to go to next. So straighten up a few lines and a little color correction, and again, that'll help. Now this next shot, the agent actually did a really nice job, really brought a lot of attention to this handcrafted glass chandelier. Showed enough of the table that you know the shape, you know the chairs are there, and showed the light off. So really nice detail shot, overall very good. Again, could have lowered it down and straightened everything up a little more, and maybe shown the top of the light as well. So when I came in, I wanted to show off this, again, handcrafted chandelier, because again, this, is what sets it apart and makes it unique from other houses that have just a generic, brand name box, store kind of light fixture. And also keep in mind, so in this particular region, they have unlimited MLS photos. Now, that can get overwhelming and you're going to lose most people, so we don't want to show them too much detail. Other areas have limitations, like in the area that I shoot the most, they have only 32 pictures that you can post. So if you start getting too many detail shots like this, don't be afraid to combine them together and put 2 pictures together, or 4 pictures, or 6 or 8 pictures, because they are close up in their details. And then you just eat up one of your online posts. And then when you go to do social media and that kind of thing, then you can break them up and just show one picture at a time. Or if you do a virtual tour slideshow or something like that, then you can have all the individual photos separately. So now let's show off the dining room in its entirety. And so here's a couple things of note. If we look in the bottom right hand corner, we're going to see that there's some kind of ugly electrical cords. Again, that's not very attractive. And the typical thing with a small cell phone sensor, outside's a little overexposed, inside's way underexposed. So maybe we could have brought a light in behind us. Definitely could use a little color correction. But composition, for the most part is good. The lines could, straighten up a bit. So the left-hand door jamb is actually fairly straight. So did a good job paying attention to that. But the bottom right corner is kind of dropped down and out of square. So again, turning on grid lines would really help square things up. Now, if you look at the patio door, the screen and the patio door are misaligned. So we have extra lines going up and blocking our view. So that kind of messes up with our symmetry and just blocks our view. So keep in mind that we do want as clean a views and not have a whole bunch of extra lines distracting things. Normally, I would get rid of this dark rug in the bottom left-hand corner, because again, that's a distraction and brings your eye the wrong direction. We really want to lead people outside. But while I'm talking about symmetry, I'm going to go ahead and jump back up to the very beginning and talk about the outside. Let's get the little better version of that picture. And if we look at the front of the house, remember how I mentioned that our mind's kind of in conflict and having this little argument with itself, again, subconsciously. So it's looking at, gosh, things are off and the colors are off and the, angles are off and all that kind of stuff. And if we look at the left-hand window, that window blind is halfway open. If we look at the right-hand side, it's only a quarter of the way open. So one of the things that our minds perceive is that, okay, this picture isn't balanced and there's several things going on, but one of them is the house is winking at us. It's got one window, barely open, and one where it's, half open. So do pay attention to symmetry and just kind of take a step back, scan everything, scan the edges, get, ugly trash cans out of your way and that kind of thing. And just make sure that you're presenting a good marketing photo. So just imagine, Ford Mustang showing off, a magazine cover shot, just is not going to have a trash can in it. And, the headlights are going to be on and so have a little sparkle, and it's going to, be really cool and well lit. So back to the dining room. Here's my version of the dining room. And I went a little bit wider so I could show off the artwork on the left. But now I'm going to bring in a little bit of science and brain science of artwork. And so rule of thirds, where I want to lead people is to the outside. Because let's face it, we'd much rather spend time outside than inside. And so this is kind of the point of this picture. And so in the left third, which is the focal point, is where I place the patio doors. Now I had to kind of scoot and scoot and scoot just a little bit to the left until I could use this chair to cover up most of that electrical cord. So it's really indiscernible and it's no longer a distraction. So this gives us an idea of keeping everything level and straight and well lit and so on. All right, so now let's go outside where we're headed next. And as I talked about, rule of thirds, if you notice on the right-hand side is kind of the interesting focal point with sculptures on the tree. So you want to try and avoid putting your focal point or the thing of interest in the dead center of your picture. Unless you're doing a headshot, it's about the only time you want to put a dead center. Otherwise, you want to put your things of interest to the right third or to the left third. So in this case, these little caricatures are looking to the left, so we want to give them looking room, if you will. We want to give them space. And so now our mind can kind of start to really enjoy the space and see what they're looking at. And again, we're starting to invoke some emotions, which is what we want out of a picture, and it's hard to do in a 2D forum. So we really need to kind of get out of that just click, 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 mindless snapshot mode and really figure out, okay, what's the purpose of this marketing photo? I'm trying to get people to write a big check. So how do I do that? So in this case, we can really start to see the birds in our mind, splashing in the water fountain, and we can almost hear them chirping and, smell the fresh air and the breeze outside. So again, we want to have a purpose to our photos, and, this gives us an idea of that looking room. So this particular yard, they have some very nice landscaping, and a lot of homes, as you know, just do not have, very many flowers, or just pretty basic. Not everyone's a gardener. But there's a few things with this scene is that front flower is very, very bright and overexposed because the sun is hitting it directly, but the back flower is in full shade. So a couple things that we could have done is either shade the front flower so that it's also in shade so that everything is evenly exposed, or we could have turned on the flash to try and add some light to the back. And generally, you're not going to add extra light to the front one because it's the same color temperature as the outside. 5,600 degrees Kelvin is your typical flash. So it really isn't going to brighten up the front, but it will add a lot of light and bring up the shadows in the back. And you could actually probably do both, cover up the flower in the front and then with your phone, take the shot, or with your camera, take the shot, adding a little flash and adding the light in there. So again, details matter a lot. Now, where details really matter is what a cell phone does pretty well is when there's not a lot of contrast with a bright window and then a dark interior. So when everything's fairly evenly lit, cell phones do really well. Those little small sensors can handle that narrower dynamic range, or where the light isn't so drastic from one end to the other. And so what we want to concentrate on here is kind of the typical thing that, look, we're trying to attract as many potential buyers or renters or whatever, so that we can choose and have a good pool and get our schedule full, or get extra offers and bids on the house and keep the price higher. So to do that, we need to remove anything that might repel someone that would potentially be interested. So someone that maybe has different political views, someone that has different religious views, someone that's, if they see this house and their little son Johnny is allergic to cats, it's like, oh, I don't like that house. Their just body already has this natural negative reaction because, they're the ones who had to take their kid to the doctor's office and sees their kid miserable, because they're allergic to cats in this case. So we wouldn't want to show the cat tree. Same thing with, if somebody's strongly about political views and your homeowner is showing the opposing political views. They just have this immediate negative reaction that they don't control, they don't think about it. It just happens automatically, and it's strong and powerful. So we want to remove those things and tell our homeowners, look, you don't live here anymore. Get your shit out of here. Go pack it up, and you're moving anyhow. So get your personal things out so that we can appeal to as many interested, potential clients as possible. Now, the other thing I do before I start doing photos is I go turn on all the lights throughout the house so that we don't get these big dark, stairwells and dark caves in the background, because invariably wherever you turn around, there's going to be a dark spot down a hallway or back corner or next to a kitchen and that type of thing. So just go through first and turn on all the lights. Now, I'm going to tell you there's an opposing view to mine. So there's another crew, the Lights Off gang, where they like to show the house. Now they're using professional cameras and bigger sensors that do well in low light, but they like the lights off. I don't like that style. but it is an art form, so you choose what you like and experiment with what you like. I like having the lights, and I like having the contrast, and I like having the drama. It just feels much more natural. Whereas lights off to me is just very flat and very sterile and just, doesn't bring out any emotions. And I'm trying to market to get people to write checks. And so I'm trying to get those emotions engaged because, people really do buy with their eyes. So after a little decluttering and straightening and deciding whether or not we want these flowers on the right to be in the picture or out of the picture, we decide to move those out or move them in or move the camera, but it doesn't help to have little pieces of things on those outside edges because we want the attention to be on this staircase. And again, this is where our cell phone does really well. So here's where I straightened up the shot and used his cell phone and just got a little straighter on shot. Didn't bother with the cat tree. If it were a normal listing, we'd have moved that out of the way. But again, for a cell phone photo, this is pretty darn good. And again, the little flash is very, very weak. It doesn't do much for adding light. But in a small space like this, a little pop of flash can open up some of the shadows and make that look nice and presentable. And again, the difference between having a straight on shot. Now this is looking down a bit, but you get the idea. We can make where we don't have a lot of contrast and lighting. Cell phones do really well. So now let's move on to a bedroom. And my rule is that any of the rooms should have just one purpose. And in this case, the purpose is a bedroom. But how many times do you come into a house where there's exercise equipment and a desk and pet pet houses and pet beds and those kind of things? So that all gets very confusing, and your buyer just is like, oh gosh, how do I use this room or this or that or the other? Just everyone calm down. We're going to make this space a relaxing, serene bedroom where we can picture yourself just sitting on the nice cozy bed there and reading a book. So so I coached the realtor in this, and okay, now let's lower the camera down, get all of your angles nice and level and nice and straight. Then let's make this just a bedroom, and let's not worry about the office part that's showing to behind us to the right. Now, the only thing I would have done different is move the camera a little more to the left and gotten rid of another cat tree or pet type of things and made it just pet areas, which when I brought my camera in is exactly what I did. Now in the bottom left-hand corner, there's a shredder, it could have been a scanner. Normally I'd unplug that with the permission of the owner. We don't want to unplug things that have programming or clocks or those kind of things because, again, we don't want to be a pain in the butt or nuisance to our clients. So we want to make this a painless process if we can. And a scanner or shredder is much less distracting than like a pet evidence is something that people have a strong reaction to. They can give or take that type of thing. But we've got a nice view here, and it's all just serene and relaxing. And again, you can picture yourself here just reading a good book and relaxing in this bedroom area. So now let's turn to the office corner, and the realtor took this shot, forgot the instruction that I just gave him about getting down level and getting everything square and so on. Now, I will point out that on the right is, the closet space here. Normally, I just don't put a lot of attention on closets unless it's a designer California closet with cool organizers and all that kind of thing. Then I'll show off closets, but closets typically are where we hide things and put things away. So it isn't the pretty cool stuff. So I generally am going to focus on the view, the millwork around the windows and the trim, and those kinds of things. And a closet's a closet. Same thing with garages. I generally don't show the inside of a garage unless it's a cool garage. It's all finished with amazing cabinetry and storage and high-end stuff and maybe a really cool workbench that's decluttered and so on. So otherwise, just no purpose of showing the inside of the garage. We can show that off from the outside photo. Yep, it'll fit 2 cars, that type of thing. So moving on, again, if he'd have just straightened this up a bit, would have been a much better photo. And if we'd have cut off kind of the bed-looking things on the left and made it look more like a couch, okay, now it's just an office corner. And if you remember, this is one of the windows that was halfway up, and if we did the bedroom next to it, that blind was 3/4 of the way down, so we'd want to open them all up. So typically, if we can get views outside that have some greenery or blue sky, we don't want to have all those little tiny slats of a window blind that are all just tilted open. We want to lift them all the way up and show all that greenery. But again, the downside with a cell phone is we get overexposed outsides and then underexposed insides because it can't see the difference necessarily. So a little bit of editing, or if we could bring in some extra flash power, and you can get a big flash that'll work with your cell phone. So now we're going to move on to one of the most difficult things to photograph, and that's the bathrooms, especially hall bathrooms. Master baths have a little more elbow room. But what we want to focus on, the value in this bathroom is on the right-hand side with the cabinetry and the vanity and the granite countertop and the high-end faucets and brand name faucets, and in this case it's got a deluxe mirror, and it's got some nice lighting in there. So that's where the money is at, and so we want to generally focus in that area. So kind of explaining that to the realtor, he turned and he got the focal point looking at that area. So again, that's where the money is at, that's where the value is at. Now I will point out a couple things in here. So very crooked picture again, again up at eye level, pointed down. And on the left-hand side, we have just a teeny tiny sliver of window. And if we try and straighten this up afterwards, we're going to lose the window. So either decide in your photos that you want the window to show, so show enough of it that our brain can put it together, or leave it out altogether. And definitely don't ever show door jambs. Again, it's just very distracting, very unattractive, adds extra lines, and just takes away from the beauty of this with all these shadows and lines and this dark area to the very right. Now, one very important rule I'm going to explain to you, and that you want to explain to your clients: our brain does not like personal hygiene products. And we have an overreaction when we see personal hygiene products. We just kind of cringe, it's dirty, it's yuck, it's whatever. So we don't want our people who are going to write checks to us to have that kind of reaction. So if we're going to sell somebody's house and we're taking pictures for them, or if we're going to show an Airbnb space, we want to remove all those personal items from the photos and from the open houses. Because just imagine that you rent a nice luxury hotel, a resort place, or you book a really nice Airbnb and you go walk in the bathroom, and the last guest there, Bob, left us foot cream oozing out over the tub. And there on the vanity is the toothpaste that's all crinkled up and smudged on the countertops, and a toothbrush, used toothbrush kind of dripping over the edge of the sink, and the soap that's all, used and cruddy in the, soap dish and all that. It's just, again, our brain is like, ugh, just this place isn't clean, right? So we don't want to leave those kind of clues. We want everything to be ready for you and clean and welcoming, just like you'd expect if you rented a nice resort hotel or a really nice high-end Airbnb. You want the place to be ready for you. So tell your clients, hey, your personal hygiene products, put those in a plastic bag, shove them in a drawer, shove them under the sink, or take them with you to a hotel if you're going out of town. You'll still have them accessible, but hey, we're doing pictures and we're doing open houses, and we can't let our guests see that stuff. So here's my version of that photo. So I'm turned mostly towards the vanity, and where you can see the hardware, and you can see the nice recessed cabinets, and you can see the granite, you can see the faucets. I think in this case they're Kohler. You can see a nice designer mirror, and you can see a nice upgrade lighting fixture and a little storage over the commode. The toilet's closed. Again, our brain just does not like personal hygiene, kind of ick. And I took a bunch of things off the countertop here to clean up the countertop. So now our brain is concentrated on, wow, this is upgraded. It's very nice. I like this bathroom. I have some privacy with the bathroom window. And then here's another important principle. It's called the Gestalt principle of perception. And what this means is our brain can figure out that if we see a part of something recognizable, our brain can build out the rest of that and knows what else goes with it. So in this case, on the very top left, I have just a little bit of the shower curtain rod showing and a little strip of the tub shower surround showing in there. So our brain now knows there's a tub shower there, and our brain puts in the rest of that. And then the other clue is in the mirror reflection. I made sure that I turned at a direction so that we can really see that there's a tub shower showing in with enough of a shower curtain and so on. And I do tend to open up the shower curtains because it does make a small bathroom feel much bigger. And your buyers and guests want to have some kind of hint or clue. Oh, is it a shower or is it a tub? So you want to open that up and try and show that off. And again, if you can't show the full tub because you can't fit both, just somewhere try and show a sliver of a shower curtain. And again, our brain, okay, we know that that's a tub shower right there. So again, most of the focus, rule of thirds, so on the right-hand third in this particular picture, is all of our money. And then we have other things to kind of draw us in, and the window in this case is the big contrast, so we kind of draw our attention there. And we start to pick up on, bathrobe, shower curtain rod, tub shower, and so on. So our brain very quickly, makes all these decisions without, ever telling us. So the other thing we could have done is remove the rug in front of the commode down there. But they already had dark towels on the wall, so, it wasn't that big of a deal. So onto the master bedroom, and typical bedroom shot, so we want to show off, again, the window and the trim. And so we opened up the window, so now we can get a view. If you remember, that was mostly closed. And so anytime you can show some greenery and some blue sky, we want to try and do that. And now we have the nightstands with lamps and nightstands on the side. That's kind of the architectural feel and the ooh-ah, and we're showing the whole bed. We could have removed the, suit hanger and that sort of thing. But I left it on there now. If you look, it almost looks like it's, the jeans are wrapped in plastic, but they're really just faded jeans. So, had I seen that picture afterwards, or, after I did a little editing, I probably would have just taken it all the way out and probably would have asked if we could have removed the little cat shelf on the window. But generally on bedrooms, I try and show 2 walls, not 3. So in this case, you're, seeing the, left wall and right wall, and I showed just enough of the right-hand side to, show the cabinetry and the shelving in here. So I went a little wider right because there's a shelf up here, but oftentimes I would just show the, wouldn't show the little piece of corner in there. I would crop that out. But that gives, if you back up in the corner, that gives you a nice wide shot. And then the ceiling fan, I like the lights on, but generally I turn the ceiling fans off. But in this case, it just had one switch. So to get the light on, I had to have the fan going, and there wasn't a switch, and there was probably a remote hidden somewhere. But okay, so the thing that this particular realtor then left out after we got done is we talked about how if there's another competing house like this, or similar square footage, or even cheaper price, how do we show that they want to buy this house and pay more money for it and get lots of competitive bids and not give lowball offers?